This story is titled, At My Sister's Engagement Celebration, my parents forced me to babysit while others enjoyed themselves, so I plotted revenge and sabotaged her wedding day. Hey Reddit, I'm a 31-year-old woman, and I've been sitting here for about 3 hours trying to figure out if I'm actually the bad guy in this situation. I'm pretty sure I'm not, but my family is blowing up my phone telling me I'm Satan incarnate. So I figured I'd share my story here to get some outside perspective. Let me give you some background information you need to know. I have vitiligo. If you're not familiar with what that is, it's a condition where patches of your skin lose pigment, resulting in random white spots appearing on your body. Mine is mostly on my face, around my eyes, forehead, and some on my cheeks. I've had it since I was 12, and while I'm mostly comfortable with it now, it definitely made growing up in my appearance-obsessed family a living hell. Speaking of my family, they're basically a walking, talking Abercrombie commercial. My sister Natalie, 34, has always been the golden child. She's got that Instagram model look, was homecoming queen in high school, a college cheerleader, the whole damn package. My brother Thomas, 33, is the successful businessman type who drives a car that costs more than my yearly salary. And then there's me, the youngest with the skin condition. My mom still can't say vitiligo without looking like she swallowed a lemon. When I was younger, my parents spent thousands on treatments, not because they were concerned about my health, but because they were embarrassed to have a daughter who didn't fit their perfect family aesthetic. Family photos were a nightmare. They'd either make me wear a ton of makeup or position me in the back where my spots wouldn't be as noticeable. Real confidence-building stuff, you know? Despite all that fun childhood trauma, I actually turned out pretty decent. I have a good job as a project coordinator at a media company, my own apartment in a decent part of town, and enough savings that I've been comfortable. So comfortable, in fact, that when Natalie got engaged 3 months ago to this rich guy named Eric, I stupidly agreed to help her with some of the wedding expenses. You see, Eric comes from serious money, like vacation homes in 3 countries kind of money. Natalie, being Natalie, wanted to pretend she was on his level. The only problem is that her boutique retail job doesn't exactly pay the big bucks. So she came to me all teary-eyed, telling me how she needed to match Eric's contributions for the wedding, or his family would think she wasn't good enough. And like an absolute clown, I fell for it. I ended up covering her deposits for the venue, photographer, catering, and some other stuff. That's a lot of cash for someone whose sister can barely remember to tag me in family posts on Facebook. The red flags were there from the beginning, but I ignored them because, well, family, right? I've met Eric exactly twice in the 6 months they've been together. Both times at family events where Natalie kept accidentally seating me at the opposite end of the table from him. Whenever I tried to join conversations he was in, she'd suddenly need my help with something in another room. It was as subtle as a brick to the face. I figured she was just being her usual spotlight-hogging self. Natalie has always treated me like an accessory rather than a sister. When we were kids and people would ask about my vitiligo, she'd jump in with, "It's not contagious," before I could even open my mouth. In high school, she told her friends I was adopted, so they wouldn't think her perfect genes could possibly produce something like me. College was a relief because I finally got away from her for a while. So when Natalie called me last week insisting that I come to this fancy dinner with Eric's family, I was surprised but kind of hopeful. Maybe she was finally going to acknowledge all the help I'd been giving her with the wedding. Maybe she was going to introduce me properly to my future brother-in-law's family. Stupid, I know. I actually put effort into getting ready for this dinner. I spent like an hour on my makeup, not covering my vitiligo completely, as I stopped doing that years ago, but evening out my skin tone. I wore this nice dress I'd been saving for a special occasion, and even got my hair done. I pulled up to this super fancy restaurant downtown, where Eric's parents had reserved a private room, and I was feeling pretty good about myself. The moment I walked in, I knew something was off. Natalie barely looked at me. My mom gave me that tight smile she uses when she's annoyed about something, but trying to be polite. And my dad was doing that thing where he pretends to be super interested in the menu so he doesn't have to talk to me. Eric's mom, this tall blonde lady dripping in diamonds, came over and introduced herself, looking confused as hell. "And you are?" she asked, like I was some random person who'd wandered in off the street. Before I could answer, Natalie swooped in like a vulture. "This is Lily. She helps out with Thomas's kids. She's like our family nanny." I literally stopped breathing for a second. Did my sister just tell these people I was the nanny? While I'm standing right there? While I'm dressed in a $200 dress that's clearly not nanny attire? While I've been bankrolling half her wedding? I opened my mouth to correct her, but my mom shot me that, "Don't you dare make a scene. Look, she's perfected over the years." Eric looked a little confused but didn't say anything, and his dad just nodded and moved on, clearly not interested in the help. But it got worse. When it was time to sit down, there was this small table set up in the corner where Eric's little cousins or nieces or whatever were sitting. My mom put her hand on my shoulder and said, "Lily, why don't you sit over there? You could help keep an eye on the children." I looked at the main table, all fancy with the good china, wine glasses, and candles. My parents, Thomas and his wife, Natalie and Eric, and his entire family were all sitting there. But apparently, there was no room for the sister with the spotted face. So there I was, stuck at the kids' table like I'm in some bad 90s comedy movie. The little girl next to me kept asking if she could touch the white parts of my face, while her brother was flicking peas across the table. Meanwhile, at the grown-up table, my sister was laughing at everything Eric's dad said like he was Dave Chappelle or something. I tried to keep it cool. I swear I did. I've had 16 years of practice hiding my feelings about how my family treats me. But then this waiter comes by and asks if the children's nanny wants the kids' menu or the adult meal. That's when I realized Natalie hadn't just told Eric's parents I was the nanny. She'd told the entire restaurant staff. I mumbled something about the adult meal and tried not to make eye contact with anyone. The little girl next to me, I think her name was Isabella or something, kept saying, "Why is the nanny eating with us? Nannies are supposed to eat after we go to bed." Great parenting, Eric's family, really top-notch stuff. I was pushing salmon around my plate, trying to decide if I should just bail or stick it out, when Eric's mom called over to me. "So, Lily, how long have you been working for Natalie's family?" The table got quiet enough that several people at the main table looked over, including Eric, who seemed genuinely curious about the answer. Apparently, my sister hadn't bothered to flesh out her nanny backstory very well. That was it. The final straw on the camel's back that was already carrying the weight of 15 grand in wedding deposits and a lifetime of being treated like the family embarrassment. I stood up, grabbed my purse, and walked over to the main table. Natalie's face went white as a sheet when she saw me coming. My dad started doing that nervous throat-clearing thing he does when he's about to witness a train wreck. "Actually," I said, making sure I was loud enough for everyone to hear, "I'm not the nanny. I'm Natalie's younger sister." Eric blinked in confusion. His mom's mouth dropped open slightly. My mom was giving me her death stare, which I've been immune to since about age 13. "I'm the sister who paid the $5,000 deposit for your wedding venue," I continued, looking directly at Natalie now, "and the $3,200 for the catering, and the $2,800 for the photographer, and the $1,500 for the flowers, and the $2,500 for the DJ." The table went dead silent. You could have heard a mouse fart in that room. Eric was looking at Natalie like she'd suddenly grown a second head, which honestly would have been less shocking than finding out his fiancée had a secret sister she was passing off as household staff. "What is she talking about?" he asked her, his voice all quiet and dangerous-like. Natalie did this fake laugh that sounded like a dying hyena. "Lily, stop making things awkward. This isn't the time for jokes." "Oh, I'm not joking," I said, pulling out my phone and opening my banking app. "Would you like to see the transfers? $15,000 so far, to be exact. Quite expensive for a nanny's salary, don't you think?" Eric's dad, who looked like an older, more serious version of Eric, cleared his throat. "I'm confused. You told us your parents were helping with the wedding costs." My mom jumped in, trying to salvage whatever was left of this disaster. "Lily, please, don't ruin this evening. We can discuss this at home." "Discuss what?" I was on a roll now and honestly didn't give a crap anymore. How you're all perfectly fine with Natalie being ashamed of me. How she'd rather pretend I'm the help than admit she has a sister with vitiligo. How I'm good enough to foot the bill, but not good enough to sit at the same table. I turned to Eric, who looked completely shell-shocked. "Did you know Natalie had a sister? Or did she tell you her family was just perfect, like her?" The look on his face told me everything I needed to know. He had no freaking clue I existed. This dude was about to marry my sister, and she hadn't even mentioned she had another sister. That's when it really hit me how far Natalie had gone to erase me from her life. "Wait, what?" Eric said, turning to Natalie. "You told me you only had one sibling. You said it was just you and Thomas." Natalie was doing that thing where she tries to cry, but no actual tears come out. "It's complicated, babe. I was going to tell you, but..." "But what?" Eric pressed. "But you didn't want me to know your sister has vitiligo? Is that seriously what this is about?" My dad stood up, trying to take control of the situation like he always does. Perhaps we should continue this discussion in private. Eric, Mr. and Mrs. Reynolds, I apologize for the confusion. Eric's mom was looking at me like I was some kind of science experiment. So you're not the nanny? You're actually Natalie's sister? Full sister, same parents. Grew up in the same house, I confirmed. I've just got the family defect they don't like to talk about. I gestured to my face. My mom gasped like I dropped an F-bomb in church. Lily, that is not how we raised you to speak. I let out a laugh that was probably a bit too loud for a fancy restaurant. No, you raised me to hide in the background and pretend I don't exist whenever company comes over. Well, I'm done with that. I'm also done paying for Natalie's fantasy wedding to a guy who didn't even know I was alive until 5 minutes ago. I looked at Eric, who was still staring at Natalie like he was seeing her for the first time. You seem like a decent dude. You might want to ask your fiancée what else she's been lying about. Then I grabbed my coat from the back of the kiddie chair I'd been sitting in. I'm leaving, and I'm taking my money with me. Thomas finally decided to speak up. Come on, Lily, you're overreacting. Just sit down and we can talk about this. I didn't respond, just walked out, ignoring my parents calling after me. I could hear Natalie starting to cry for real as the door closed behind me, which gave me a tiny bit of satisfaction. That sounds mean, but after what she pulled, she deserved a lot worse than some tears at dinner. Once I got to my car, I had to just sit there for a minute because my hands were shaking so bad I couldn't even put the key in the ignition. I don't think I've ever been that angry in my entire life. I've put up with so much crap from my family over the years. The helpful suggestions about makeup to cover my vitiligo, the way they'd positioned me in the back of photos, the constant comparisons to Natalie. But this was a whole new level. She straight up erased me from her life while still taking my money. Who does that? It took me about 5 minutes of deep breathing before I could trust myself to drive without crashing into something. By that time, my phone was already blowing up. The first text was from my mom. How could you embarrass your sister like that? You need to come back inside and apologize right now. Then Thomas. WTF, Lily, you're acting crazy. Get back in here before you make things worse. My dad. This behavior is unacceptable. We raised you better than this. There were like 6 more messages, all saying basically the same thing. I was the problem, not Natalie's lying or my parents going along with it. Not one of them thought what she did was wrong. Not one. I scrolled through the texts, getting angrier with each one. Then it hit me. I was still holding all the cards here, or rather, all the cash. If they wanted to treat me like I didn't exist, fine. My money wouldn't exist either. I called the wedding venue and requested to cancel my sister Natalie's wedding on June 12th. I made similar calls to the catering company, the photographer, the florist, and the DJ. Each one was super nice about it, probably because they deal with wedding drama all the time. One of them even said, "Family weddings are the worst, hun. Hope it works out." By the time I was done, I had effectively erased Natalie's entire wedding, all while sitting in my car outside the restaurant where she was still probably fake crying to Eric's family. The petty part of me wanted to walk back in just to see the look on her face when the venue started calling her about the cancellations. But I'm not that much of an ass. Instead, I sent one text to the family group chat. Just canceled all the wedding reservations I paid for. Don't ask your nanny to fund your fake perfect life. Then I blocked all their numbers. Every single one. I drove home in this weird state of mind, half super satisfied with myself, half terrified about what I'd just done. I slept like garbage that night, waking up every couple of hours thinking I heard my phone, even though I'd turned off all notifications. By morning, I'd convinced myself that maybe I'd overreacted. Maybe I should have just pulled Natalie aside and talked to her privately instead of blowing everything up in front of Eric's family. Then I checked my email, since I couldn't check texts with everyone blocked, and saw a message from Natalie. The subject line was "How could you?" in all caps. Real mature. It was a long, rambling email about how I'd humiliated her in front of Eric's family, how she'd had to do damage control all night, how Eric was asking questions now, and it was all my fault. The last line was what really got me. You could have just worn more makeup if you were so worried about how you look. And there it was, the real issue, right out in the open. It wasn't about me being jealous or dramatic or overreacting. It was about my vitiligo. It always had been. Natalie was embarrassed by me, by my face, embarrassed enough to pretend I wasn't even related to her. I deleted the email without responding. There was nothing left to say. I called in sick to work for the next 2 days. I just couldn't handle the thought of going in and pretending everything was normal when my entire family had just shown me exactly how they felt about me. Plus, I was pretty sure Natalie would show up at my office if I didn't answer her calls, and I really didn't need that drama in my workplace. On the second day of my self-imposed exile, my doorbell rang around noon. I figured it was probably a package delivery, so I didn't bother to check the peephole before opening the door. Big mistake. Standing there, looking like he hadn't slept in days, was Eric, Natalie's fiancé, or maybe ex-fiancé. I wasn't sure where things stood at that point. He had this intense, almost angry look on his face that made me take a step back. "Is it true?" he demanded without even saying hello. "About the money? About being her sister?" I leaned against the doorframe, suddenly exhausted by all of it. "Yes, every word. And you're really her sister? Not some distant cousin or family friend she grew up with?" "Full sister, same parents, grew up in the same house," I confirmed for what felt like the millionth time. I've known Natalie her entire life, which is why I was stupid enough to help her in the first place. He ran his hand through his hair, looking completely lost. "She told me she was an only child until Thomas came along when she was 2. She never mentioned you. Not once in 6 months. That hurt more than I expected it to. I knew Natalie was embarrassed by me, but to completely erase me from her history? Well, now you know why," I said, gesturing to my face. "I don't exactly fit the perfect image she's trying to sell you." He stared at me for a long moment, and I braced myself for some comment about my skin. Instead, he said, "My aunt has vitiligo. So does my little cousin Mia. Did Natalie seriously think I'd care about that?" I just shrugged, but inside I was screaming. All this drama, all this pain, and Eric wouldn't have even cared about my condition. "Do you want to come in?" I offered, suddenly realizing we were having this whole conversation in my doorway. "I've got coffee or something stronger if you need it." The conversation I was about to have with Eric would blow up whatever was left of Natalie's perfectly crafted fake life. And honestly, I couldn't wait. I let Eric into my apartment, feeling weirdly self-conscious about the mess. I hadn't exactly been in a cleaning mood the past couple days. There were takeout containers on the coffee table and a blanket nest on the couch where I'd been sleeping because I was too depressed to make it to my bedroom. "Sorry about the disaster zone," I muttered, quickly grabbing some empty cups. "Wasn't exactly expecting company." "Trust me, this is nothing," Eric said, looking around. "You should see my place right now." I made us both coffee, and we sat down at my tiny kitchen table. There was this really awkward silence for a minute, like neither of us knew where to start this messed up conversation. So I finally said, "I'm guessing Natalie has a different version of what happened at dinner?" Eric let out a short laugh that didn't sound happy at all. "Yeah, you could say that. According to her, you've always been jealous of her relationship with the family, and you made up the whole thing about paying for the wedding to embarrass her in front of my parents." I nearly choked on my coffee. "Wow, that's creative. She said you've had mental health issues for years because of your skin condition, and the family usually just goes along with your episodes to keep the peace." Mental health issues? Episodes? Are you freaking kidding me? My hand was shaking so bad I had to put my mug down before I spilled coffee everywhere. "I'm a project coordinator at Mediaverse. I have a 401k and a 5-year plan. I haven't had an episode in my life." Eric was studying my face, but not in that uncomfortable way people sometimes do when they're staring at my vitiligo. He was looking at me like he was trying to figure something out. "I didn't believe her," he said quietly. "Something felt off about the whole story. That's why I came to hear your side." I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. "Here, see for yourself." I handed him the phone, showing all the payments I'd made for wedding stuff. "Check the dates. Check the amounts. I've got receipts too if you want to see them." He scrolled through, his face getting more serious with each swipe. $15,000. Jesus, Lily. "Yep. 15 grand so my sister could pretend to be as rich as you." I took my phone back. "And the best part? She hasn't even thanked me once. Not a single, 'Hey, thanks for dropping thousands on my wedding' text. Nothing." Eric was quiet for a minute, just staring at his coffee. "It's not just the money thing," he finally said. "It's the lying. She told me her family was just her parents, Thomas and his wife. She showed me family photos. I'm assuming ones you weren't in or were cropped out of." "Sounds about right," I said. "She told me she went to UCLA and graduated with honors in business. She said she's a marketing director at a boutique agency and makes 6 figures. He looked up at me. "Is any of that true?" I felt a weird mix of satisfaction and sadness. "She dropped out of community college after a year and a half. She works part-time at a clothing boutique at the mall. The only marketing she does is posting their stuff on Instagram." Eric put his head in his hands. "What else? What else has she been lying about? So I told him. Not because I wanted to destroy my sister's relationship. Okay, maybe a little bit because of that. But mostly because this poor guy deserved to know what he was getting into. I told him how Natalie had always been the golden child. How my parents had enabled her lying and manipulating from day one. How she'd been living way beyond her means since she met him to keep up the illusion. She told my parents you guys met through mutual friends in the industry, I said. Is that true? Eric shook his head. We met on a dating app. She said she was tired of dating guys who weren't ambitious enough for her. I couldn't help but laugh at that. Classic Natalie. She's never held a job for more than 8 months, but everyone else isn't ambitious enough. We talked for over an hour. It was weird how easy it was to talk to Eric, considering the circumstances. He seemed like a genuinely good guy. Smart, funny, actually listened when I was talking. The complete opposite of the rich douche I'd pictured Natalie landing. Eric nodded, then looked down at his now empty coffee mug. I need to break up with Natalie, he said quietly. I can't marry someone who's lied about basically everything, including her own sister. I felt a weird pang of guilt. Look, I didn't tell you all this to break you guys up. Yes, you did, he interrupted, but he was almost smiling. And I'm glad you did. Better to find out now than after we're married. He stood up. Thank you for being honest with me. I'm sorry about all of this. You deserved better from your family. After he left, I had this weird mix of emotions, but mostly I just felt tired. So freaking tired of all the family drama and the lies and the constant reminders that I wasn't good enough. But for the first time in my life, I didn't care what they thought. I'd spent 31 years trying to be good enough for a family that was never going to accept me. Maybe it was time to stop trying. I was about to turn in for the night when my phone dinged with an email notification. It was from Eric. Just wanted to let you know I talked to Natalie. It's over. She's telling everyone it's because of you, but that's not the whole truth. I couldn't stay with someone who lies so easily and treats their own sister like that. Take care of yourself, Lily. I stared at the message for a long time, not sure how to feel. I'd gotten what I wanted. Natalie had finally faced consequences for her actions. So why didn't I feel better? The answer came in the form of another email notification. This one from my mom with the subject line, "You've gone too far this time." I didn't bother to read it, just deleted it without responding. There was no point. They were never going to admit that Natalie was anything less than perfect, never going to acknowledge how badly they'd hurt me. I was officially done with all of them. I woke up the next morning to pounding on my door. I stumbled out of bed, still half asleep and wondering if the building was on fire or something. When I checked the peephole, I saw my mom standing there, looking like she was ready to murder someone. That someone being me, obviously. I thought about pretending I wasn't home, but she'd definitely seen the lights go on when I got up. So I took a deep breath and opened the door, but just a crack, with the chain still on. I'm not stupid. What do you want? I asked. We need to talk, she said. Let me in. No, I replied. Say whatever you need to say through the door. She looked shocked. I've never really stood up to her like that before. Don't be ridiculous, Lily. I'm not having this conversation in the hallway. Then I guess we're not having it at all. I started to close the door, but she stuck her foot in the gap. Your sister is devastated, she hissed. Eric broke off the engagement because of your lies. How could you do this to your own family? I let out a laugh that probably sounded a little unhinged. My lies? Are you serious right now? Natalie told people I was the nanny. She completely erased me from her life while taking thousands of dollars of my money. My mom had the audacity to roll her eyes. She panicked. She didn't know how to explain your condition to Eric's family. She was embarrassed. It was a mistake. A mistake? I was practically shouting now. Telling people your sister is the help and making her sit at the kids' table while she's paying for your wedding is not a mistake. It's deliberate cruelty. My mom just shook her head like I was being dramatic. You've always been so sensitive about your skin. Natalie was just trying to avoid an awkward conversation. That's when I completely lost it. Get out, I said quietly. Excuse me? Get out of my hallway now. My voice was shaking. I'm done being the family secret. I'm done being treated like I should be grateful you acknowledge me at all. I'm done with all of you. She looked genuinely surprised. I don't think she'd expected me to fight back. You can't just cut us off, Lily. We're your family. Watch me, I said and slammed the door in her face. She kept knocking for another 5 minutes, alternating between angry demands and weird attempts at guilt-tripping me. I put in headphones and cranked up my music until she finally gave up and left. I thought that would be the end of it, at least for a while. Boy, was I wrong. Over the next few days, Thomas showed up at my favorite coffee shop, the one I go to every Saturday morning, with his wife and kids, clearly hoping to accidentally run into me. I spotted them through the window and kept walking. But Natalie, she took it to a whole new level. She started posting these cryptic, passive-aggressive quotes on social media. Stuff like, "Some people will stab you and then blame you for bleeding." She didn't tag me, but all her friends started leaving supportive comments about how she deserved better, and some people are just toxic. The worst was when she showed up at my apartment building and convinced my elderly neighbor that she was bringing me medication I desperately needed. Thank God my neighbor called me before letting her in, but the stress was getting to me. I started taking different routes to work, checking my rearview mirror for familiar cars, keeping my blinds closed at all times. It sounds paranoid, but if you had my family, you'd understand. A week into the chaos, Eric showed up again unannounced, looking furious. "I think Natalie actually believes this wedding is still happening," he said, pacing my living room. He explained that he'd gotten a call from a high-end venue confirming his final guest count for the wedding. Except he hadn't booked anything. Natalie had. Turns out she had reserved a brand new venue and put the deposit down under Eric's name, assuming he wouldn't cancel. When the planner mentioned the upcoming payments, nearly $20,000 for catering, decor, and a designer dress fitting, Eric realized she had gone behind his back. "She must have thought I'd just go along with it," he said, shaking his head. "Like I wouldn't notice a whole ass wedding being planned without my consent." He immediately called the venue and canceled everything, but he wasn't done yet. "She used my name on the contracts. If payments go through, legally I'd be responsible." "That's fraud, Lily." I hesitated, knowing she'd blame me, but he shut it down. "I don't care what she thinks. She needs to face consequences for once in her life." After he left, I sat on my couch for a long time, thinking about how quickly everything had spiraled out of control, all because I'd refused to play along with being the family embarrassment one more time. I opened my inbox to find an email from Natalie's friend Melissa with the subject line, "Thought you should see this." Inside was a screenshot of a private Instagram story Natalie had posted. It was a picture of me from years ago, before I'd come to terms with my vitiligo, when I was still trying desperately to cover it up with makeup. I looked miserable. The caption read, "When your mentally unstable sister ruins your life because she's jealous of your happiness. Some people are just born toxic." She'd tagged a bunch of mental health advocacy accounts, positioning herself as the poor suffering family member dealing with my issues. The comments were full of people offering support and telling her what an amazing person she was for putting up with me for so long. I felt sick to my stomach. This wasn't just Natalie being petty or spiteful. This was a calculated attempt to destroy my reputation, to make me the villain in her story. And the worst part? People were believing her. I picked up my phone and dialed the number of the one person I thought might actually be able to help me deal with this nightmare. "May I help you?" Eric answered. I called Eric about Natalie's social media smear campaign. She was telling everyone I was mentally ill and obsessed with ruining her perfect life. "She's setting up a narrative," Eric said. "If she can convince everyone you're unstable, it makes it easier to claim I'm filing fraud charges because you manipulated me." "What should I do?" I asked. "People are starting to believe her." "Document everything," he said. "I'm meeting my lawyer this afternoon about the credit card fraud. You should come. This is getting into defamation territory." That same day, HR called me in for an urgent meeting. Turns out my parents had contacted my workplace, claiming I was psychologically unfit to do my job. They'd sent screenshots of Natalie's posts and a formal letter expressing grave concerns about my mental state. Luckily, I had a good track record with the company. I showed them the evidence of Natalie's lies and explained I was meeting with a lawyer that afternoon. They were understanding, but warned me to keep them updated if the situation might affect my work. I was shaking with rage when I met Eric at the lawyer's office. My parents tried to get me fired. Eric's lawyer reviewed my evidence and sent cease and desist letters to Natalie and my parents, while Eric moved forward with the credit card fraud charges. That evening, as I processed everything, I got a text from Eric's cousin Lisa saying she was on my side. Before I could reply, my phone rang. It was Thomas. He warned me about Natalie's escalating behavior and the lengths my parents were going to in order to sabotage me. I immediately changed my locks and stayed at Eric's place while the legal process unfolded. The cease and desist letters worked. Natalie deleted her posts, and my parents scrambled to do damage control. But Eric's fraud case moved forward with proof of over $20,000 in unauthorized charges. 10 days later, my mom emailed asking to resolve things as a family without lawyers or police. Eric and I met my parents at a public coffee shop. I told him to come as my witness. We wanted to talk about finding a way forward, my dad said. These legal actions are going to tear this family apart. The family was already torn apart, I replied. You chose Natalie over me. You always have. You made me feel ashamed of my vitiligo from the moment I was diagnosed. The only difference now is that I'm finally standing up for myself. We just wanted to protect you, my dad said weakly. We didn't want people to judge you. The only people who ever treated me differently were you, I shot back. My vitiligo doesn't make me less than anyone else. The problem was never my skin. It was your shame about it. My mom eventually admitted they'd made mistakes, but her apology wasn't enough after everything they'd done. What do you want from us? My dad asked. A public apology from all of you acknowledging the lies, a retraction letter to my company. And I want you all to get therapy to understand why you thought treating me like this was okay. My parents balked at a public apology and asked if I'd drop the legal actions if they agreed. I told them the defamation case depended on their future behavior, but the credit card fraud was Eric's decision, not mine. I'm not dropping the charges, Eric confirmed. Natalie committed a crime. My parents seemed deflated. They'd expected to say sorry and have everything go back to normal. We'll think about it, my dad said. But Lily, please reconsider. We're still your family. No, I simply replied. 2 weeks later, my parents actually posted the public apology and sent a retraction to my company. Natalie took a plea deal on the fraud charges that included probation, restitution, and mandatory therapy. She never apologized directly, but did post a statement saying she'd misrepresented certain facts about me. Thomas and I are slowly rebuilding some kind of relationship. He's making an effort to understand how his silence enabled my parents and Natalie's behavior. And you know what? Eric and I started dating. What began as him being my ally evolved into something more. His cousin Lisa and I are friends now too. It's nice having someone who understands what it's like to live with vitiligo. I still have days where I'm angry about everything my family put me through, but mostly I'm grateful. I finally found the courage to stand up for myself. So sometimes it takes hitting rock bottom to realize you deserve better. Edit. Thanks for all the support.